Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roach Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. Nate Oats and Alabama basketball, they're losing a lot of talent to the NBA draft and the transfer portal, but finally they have brought in a big transfer portal addition. Aaron Estrada, the former Hofstra guard, has decided to transfer to Alabama basketball. I'm going to go over how important Aaron Estrada will be for Alabama's prospect of being a top SEC team next season, and whether I think he could be by far the best guard on the Alabama roster next year. Now, Aaron Estrada, he was the former two-time CAA Player of the Year. He is a great basketball player. He's a 6'3", 195-pound guard, and Aaron Estrada is definitely a player that I felt definitely could have tested the NBA draft waters this offseason and potentially gone pro. He is a great player. He is an older guy. He only has 1 year of eligibility left, and when you are older, it is tough to go pro, but he is a stud basketball player. He is fantastic, and it is always tough to project how a player will be able to make that jump from a smaller school to a bigger school overall, but Aaron Estrada is a great basketball player. I don't think he'll have any problems in that regard. He averaged 20.2 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, and 4.3 assists for Hofstra last season. He was by far their best player, and he led Hofstra to a really solid season last year. Looking at his numbers, he is solid in every area. He's a great shooter, he's a great scorer, he's a good rebounder, and he's a good passer for his size. He does everything well. He shot 47.8% from the field last season, 36.8% from the three-point line, and 80.9% from the free throw line. None of those areas are bad. He shoots well from all three phases of the floor. He can get to the rim. He's good at laying it in. He's also a really solid three-point shooter, and even though he was on a basketball team where he was asked to do a lot of the scoring, he still shot 37% from three, so that's really solid overall, being able to shoot that good of a percentage from the three-point line when a mark's on your back, when the opponents that you're playing know you're the best player on the floor by far on a given basketball team, so that's solid, and he shot 81% at the line. There is not a lot of holes in Aaron Estrada's game, and if he has a really good season at Alabama next year, I think he definitely could be a guy that still can go to the NBA draft. But this is a big addition for Nate Oats in Alabama basketball, because look at what the Crimson Tide are losing. Brandon Miller, he is gone, and that is not a surprise. Brandon Miller is going to be a top 5 player in the NBA draft this season. He had a fantastic season for Alabama basketball last year. The former 5-star McDonald's All-American recruit. He had a great season. He lived up to the hype and more for Alabama basketball, and he led the Crimson Tide to the Sweet 16 last year. Even with all the cloudiness with what happened with him and what happened to the Alabama program last year, he fought through it, and he still played at a high level, and even though he got banged up at the end of the season, he had a great year for Alabama, but they're going to have to replace that talent. I feel like Aaron Estrada can do that in a lot of ways, even though Aaron Estrada is a guard and Brandon Miller was a forward. Noah Clowney, he declared for the NBA draft as well. He's gone. Both those players were fantastic in their freshman seasons for Alabama, and they both deserve to go to the NBA draft, but that leaves massive holes on the Alabama roster and a lot of production. Javon Quinterly, Mark Sears, and Charles Bediako are all testing the NBA draft waters. I think that all three of those players could return for Alabama, and if Javon Quinterly and Mark Sears return, that could really be able to help Aaron Estrada have 2 other guards that are really solid as well, and they'll all be able to share the basketball and split the guard duties in the backcourt for Bama next season, and that could really help out the Crimson Tide have one of the best guard rotations in college basketball and in the SEC next season. Arkansas has done a great job in the transfer portal as well, especially getting guards with what Eric Muslim is doing with the Razorbacks. But if Alabama can get Javon Quinterly and Mark Sears back to go along with Aaron Estrada in the backcourt, I feel like Alabama could have one of the best backcourts in the SEC next season. Charles Bediako, again, he's testing the NBA draft waters. If he comes back, he'll really help out the center position for Bama, considering the fact that Brandon Miller and Noah Clowney are gone. They really need him back, but again, I feel like all 3 players will return, but until they do, we don't know what's going to happen there. Namari Burnett and Jaden Bradley are both in the transfer portal. They're gone for Alabama basketball. Both are tough losses because they were guys in the backcourt that actually helped out the Alabama roster last season in a variety of ways. They were by no means the leading scorers for Alabama, but losing both those players, considering the fact that Alabama has a lot of players that are going to the NBA and now in the portal, I think it would have been big for Alabama to get Namari Burnett and Jaden Bradley back. But that, again, is where Aaron Estrada comes in. He'll be a guy that can plug in and play at a high level for Alabama next year. I don't think there's going to be a big adjustment period for Aaron Estrada having to go from Hofstra to Alabama. He's already a great player, so I think that he'll be able to adjust to the SEC level of play in a heartbeat. I don't think he's going to have a hard time there, and if he can have Javon Quinterly and Mark Sears next to him as well next season, then Alabama could be a really dangerous basketball team next year in the SEC yet again, and they could have an even more balanced roster overall if Nate Oats can start bringing in some more transfer portal players, or they can get some of the guys back that are testing the NBA draft waters. But that's not all for Alabama basketball. Aaron Estrada is not the only transfer portal player that Nate Oats is brought in for the Crimson Tide for next season, even though he is by far the biggest name, the first big name Alabama's gotten. But Jaquan Walton, a transfer portal forward from the Wichita State Shockers, he's coming into the Alabama Crimson Tide. He's a 6'7" forward who averaged 14 points per game for Wichita State last season. I definitely think he's a guy that could have a big impact on Alabama next season. He does a lot of things on the basketball court. He can shoot the basketball. He can drive as well. So I'm looking at Jaquan Walton. Even though I don't think he's going to have as big of a role as Aaron Estrada will for Alabama this season, I still think Jaquan Walton will be a very important transfer portal player for Alabama, because Alabama does have a weakness at that 3 spot, having a forward that can do a lot of things. I feel like Jaquan Walton has a really good chance to be able to slide into that starting 3 spot for Alabama next year, and if he has a really solid season to pair with the guards that Alabama's bringing in, then I think that Alabama could be one of the better teams in college basketball next year. You could even have Jaquan Walton at the 4, and if Javon Quinterly and Mark Sears come back, you could have Aaron Estrada in there as well, a 3-guard lineup with Jaquan Walton, and then maybe Charles Bediako if he does return. Alabama will be a smaller team than some of the other teams in college basketball, but that's not devoid of talent. That is a really talented lineup. And Alabama is also bringing in 3 4-star recruits from the high school rankings. Sam Walters, Mohamed Diabate, and Chris Parker as well. Chris Parker has not signed his national letter of intent yet, but he more than likely will. And Alabama will have 3 4-star recruits all coming in that more than likely all of them will be coming off the bench, but those will be solid depth pieces for the future for Alabama basketball. And depth wins in college basketball. If you do not have depth and you only have a good starting 5, you still can win a lot of games, but having great depth as well, you can wear down the other basketball team, especially when you get into March Madness. Having more guys than the other team has to be able to deploy on the floor and be able to make the other team really have to work for it, and they can get really tired. So I'm looking at Alabama's roster, and Nate Oats, I think he's doing a fantastic job, and I'm seeing a really dangerous basketball team for next season. I don't know if Alabama basketball is going to be the best team in the SEC next season. Right now, I'm looking at Arkansas, and I see a great Razorback team being built by Eric Musselman for next season. Obviously, he's going to have to mesh it together, but they have some great guards coming in, some great transfer portal players overall. Kentucky, they look like they could be back to John Calipari form with all the 5-star recruits they brought in, but obviously having a young team, you don't know how they're going to develop. But the SEC looks to be a great conference again in college basketball, and Alabama is right in the thick of it. If they can get Javon Quinterly, Mark Sears, and Charles Bediako to come back from testing the NBA draft waters, it will vastly improve the ceiling and floor for the Alabama Crimson Tide next year. And you have a really good recruiting class coming in with 3 4-star players. The future is looking really bright for Alabama under Nate Oats, and it looks like he is going to have the Crimson Tide being really good for years to come. Jaquan Walton's a good transfer portal addition at the potential 3 or 4 spot for Alabama next year, but the prize jewel of the transfer portal for Alabama basketball is getting Aaron Estrada, the former Hofstra guard. He will have a massive role for Alabama next season. I think he'll be able to easily slide into their starting lineup, and if he has Javon Quinterly and Mark Sears next to him next season, Alabama will have one of the best backcourts in college basketball next year. Aaron Estrada, I don't think there will be an adjustment period. He's a great basketball player, and Nate Oats did a fantastic job bringing him in, because Aaron Estrada was being recruited by a lot of other schools as well, and I would not have been surprised if he did go to some of those other schools, because they really needed a guard. But Alabama has potential spots open to that guard position, but if they do get Mark Sears and Javon Quinterly back, that backcourt will be loaded overall. But Aaron Estrada, he could be the best guard for Alabama next season. He could be one of the most talented players on Alabama's roster next season, because he is a do-it-all player. He can shoot the 3, he's a great ball handler, and he's also a guy that can score on his own and get a lot of buckets in a variety of ways. This is a great addition for Nate Oats and the Alabama Crimson Tide for next season, and with Aaron Estrada and all the other players that Alabama could have on their roster for next season, and if Nate Oats is able to get another transfer portal player or 2, Alabama could be the best team in the SEC next season, but there will be a lot of competition with Arkansas and Kentucky. But Aaron Estrada at least gives Alabama the chance to be in the thick of the race for the best team in the SEC for next season. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Comment down below what you think about Aaron Estrada transferring from Hofstra to Alabama, and whether you think Aaron Estrada will be the best guard on Alabama's roster next year, and how much you think he'll be able to help out Alabama be a great team in college basketball next season, and how good of a job you think Nate Oats is doing in the transfer portal overall for the Crimson Tide. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I will see you next time.